Hello, welcome to IO Codes. In this video, we are going to be looking at how to integrate the Firebase storage system with our Spring Boot project. So I already have a template Spring Boot application, as you can see, and then we are going to be looking at how to integrate the storage service of Firebase with it. So I'd love to show you how to get started with me on this video tutorial so you can follow along. Now I'll be providing a link to get the template in GitHub description, and as well as show you how you get to clone this particular project. Okay, so if I move about to my browser, and right here in my main branch, I'll show you the readme that I've defined for this particular GitHub repository. And to clone the start branch, in order for you to get started with the project, you have to copy the whole of this git command, git clone -b start, then single branch, then the link to the GitHub repository. So that is all you have to do. Then you clone the start branch, because the start branch pretty much contains the template to get started with the project. Now back to my IntelliJ code editor. I'm still in the main branch, but then I want to show you what you see when you get started with the project inside of the start branch. So right here, I'll click on start, and then I want to check out to this branch. So this is the content of the start branch. Right now, none of these codes are in the main branch. So after this explanation, I'm going to merge my start branch with the main branch, and then I'll continue from there. So we'll take a look at what we have here. We have our student controller, and this student controller just defines a couple of endpoints. We have our get mapping for the initial index page, and it redirects to the home page, and you discover that this home page returns the index templates that we have defined inside of our template resource directory. So both /student and /home will return the same view for our index. So we also have a post mapping to get student, and we also have the post mapping to add student to our database. So before the creation of this video, or before I got to this point, I already saved the dummy data of a particular student into the database. And we are going to be using that student to see what we have and how the application looks at the end of the day. Okay, so with all of those stated, let's run the application and see what is contained in this particular application. So while the application is starting, let's take a look at our application on properties file, and just give you a brief walkthrough of what we have. So I'm making use of a Postgres SQL database. Now in the case of Firebase, apart from the storage system, Firebase also allows you build application and also deploy that application. So Firebase pretty much offers a lot of service, and one of those services that it also offers is database storage system, and also normal file storage system, something similar to the AWS S3 buckets feature. So the reason I'm making use of Firebase is when starting an application, or when starting a business, and you are trying to get hold of customers or users for your application, but you are not targeting a large audience, you get started with platforms like Firebase because of the free tier that it provides. Okay, so it reduces the cost. In a way, it's cost effective, so that is just one of the reasons why I think Firebase is a good choice to get started with when you are building up an application that you don't really have to target lots of audiences. So that is one thing about Firebase. So back now to the application, it started running, and I'll pay a visit to the localhost endpoint. So that should be localhost 8080. At first, let's go over to the home page, and we'll take a look at what we have here. We have to fill our form to find a particular student. So I have a student already defined by the email anthony@gmail.com. And then right here, to add a new student to our database or to our system, we'll have to fill in this data: the first name, last name, middle name, email, about student, the speech of the student, contact info, the photo, and the age. So basically what we are concerned with, since we are dealing with the storage system from Firebase, we are concerned with how to store the photo of the particular student. So we can't store this photo in PostgreSQL database. So for easy retrieving, for easy retrieval, we want to store this photo in Firebase and get the URL to the particular photo of the student and store in the database as a string. Then we'll be able to access the photo of the particular student using the URL that was stored inside of the database. Now this concept follows a lot of logic, and you'll be seeing all of those in this video tutorial. So back to the top, since I already have a student with the email anthony@gmail.com, I'm going to show you the final product of this application, which happens to be the complete profile or the defined profile of Anthony or any other student that you should be registering. So I'll click on Anthony and then I'll send. So we have me, the student, and we have the image of Anthony right here, the name Anthony. We also have the about me, opening remarks, contact, and hobbies of Anthony, which is playing football, reading stories, traveling, and cooking. And that is just it, and it's much more looks like a PDF file. Now you can go ahead and create logic to download this particular file as PDF and have it inside of your computer. So basically most of these receipts we download online, our resumes that we download online, they can be done by just designing a div, providing the necessary components or the necessary features of that particular item, and then you just have to download that particular content inside of the div element and store as PDF. So you just have to provide the logic if you want to go ahead and store this as PDF. Okay, so we have made this, then we have the IO code image. So I'll show you the template of this simple profile of a particular student. So back to IntelliJ, we want to take a look at our view. So we have three different view or three HTML files inside of the template directory. So starting with that of the profile, we discovered that we just have the header part, the body part, and the body part is not much. But inside of the body part, we are calling a fragment. We are inserting a fragment, which happens to be the profile template. So this profile template is everything that has to do with the particular student. And at first, we are checking that the student that is being sent from the model or our controller is present and is not null before we show the fragment or before we show the profile template of that particular student. So this application makes use of a template engine known as thymeleaf. Okay, thymeleaf uses natural templating in the sense that if I'm to run my HTML file, I still get something similar to what I will be having, just that the HTML file will be with dummy data, and it won't be dynamic because the data are not being sent from the server. But thymeleaf helps us to get the data from the model, from our controller class, and then display it inside of the HTML view file. So look at what we have here from our index page or our home page. We have set the new student attribute DTO, and we have also set another new student attribute as well. And when we take a look at our post mapping as well, we have also set a student attribute passing a student object. That is, we get the student by email, and we pass it as attributes to the model, and then we return the profile. Now back to the profile HTML file, we are checking that student that was being sent as object to the view is not null before we display our profile template. Now all of this logic has is pretty much thymeleaf related. Now if you don't know what thymeleaf is, or you want to get to know what thymeleaf does, and or perhaps you know what thymeleaf is but you don't really know how to make use of it, and you want me to make a video on it, please do let me know in the comment section, and I get to see what I can do about it, and we'll have a video on it in the future. Now in addition to that, please, if you are here to subscribe to this channel, please do so. Give this video a thumbs up and also ping that bell icon so that whenever I upload next videos you get notified. So back to our application. I believe you already know everything I'm trying to say. I believe you already get the concept. You got the concept already of the application, and our entity pretty much defined a couple of fields, and you can see that right here inside of our student entity, I'm defining a private string email, and the column has a unique value of true. This implies that no two email would be the same inside of our database. So if I'm registering a user with an already existing email, it's going to result in an error, and that user will not be stored inside of the database. So each email of a particular student should be unique, and that is what we have in reality. So that is basically it for the explanation part of this first introductory part of the video. Next thing we want to take a look at is how to set up our Firebase storage. Okay, now we have the Firebase website on the screen. So if you have an account with Firebase already, this is pretty much what you see. And this project you see here are projects I already have built before with Firebase. Basically the only thing, or the only Firebase services I'm making use of from this project is just the storage service. So if you don't have an account with Firebase prior to this moment, you can go ahead, create one with Firebase, and then you'll be presented with this page. Now to create a new project, you have to click on this add project, and you want to provide a name for your project. Now we are integrating Spring and Firebase, so I'll just give it a simple name. I'll call it Spring Firebase. So it's as simple as that. So I want to just keep it simple, and then we are asked if we want to enable Google Analytics report. So it depends on you, but I believe this is going to incur cost, and since I'm just making use of this project for tutorial case, I don't think I have to enable Google Analytics for the project. So I'll go ahead and create the project. So it's going to take some time to set up the necessary things that is needed for the project. So about 10 to 15 seconds, and I think we should be done. Sorry. Okay, right now this is the finishing phase, and it says your Firebase project is ready. So continue. Now, like I stated, Firebase pretty much has a couple of services that it offers, so I'll cancel that one. And some of those services includes authentication, Cloud Firestore, which I don't really know what it does, but we already know what authentication is. We have storage, which we'll be taking a close look at, and we have hosting, deploy web apps in seconds, and finally the other ones. And you can also integrate Firebase with some of what Google Cloud has to offer. If we click on all products, you get to see the all products here, and even machine learning is also there as well. So that is it. And back to our storage, let's see the storage service. I'll click on it, and we want to get started. I want to get started in production mode, so click on next, and we want to choose the storage location. So there are a couple of storage locations, so I just leave it as the one that was presented to us at first, and then we click on done. Okay, so it's creating our bucket for us, as well as setting the necessary security rules And when this setting up is done, we'll be presented with our storage bucket. I'll take a close look at how it looks. And I'll just duplicate my page, and right here I'll move over to the home page of Firebase, to my home account page, and I'll show you something I was trying to explain. So back to this, oops, not that one, but this one, which is seller marketplace. I have set up a bucket inside of this particular project, and I have a couple of directories inside of this bucket, and I have a couple of images inside this directory. So we'll take a look at this particular first one, and we'll see that this is the image. So when I click on this link, it's going to open a new page for me, and we'll get this image. So the image you saw previously is this particular image. The image you saw in my student profile, that is this one. So what I pretty much just did was copy hard-coded string link of this particular image and placed it in the source attribute of the image element inside of my profile template. So that is it. So what we want to do now is create a logic that ensures that we upload an image, and that image is being stored inside of our Firebase bucket, our Firebase storage bucket to be precise. So that is it. Now we can go ahead, upload file, but what we want to upload, what the files we want to upload them directly from our application. So with this, we have practically set up our storage bucket, but there's still one thing. We need to authenticate, or we need the necessary credentials and the private key in order for us to be able to make use of any of the services that this Firebase has to offer, and we have to connect with this particular project, okay, the Spring Firebase project. So when I click on this settings icon, we go to project settings. I want to go to service account, so I click on service account, and want to take a look at what we have for Java, the little code. So see that to create a service account, we have to first of all generate a private key, and to initialize the Firebase options inside of our project, we create a bean, and then we initialize it. So you are going to be seeing all of that in a moment from now. So you can copy the whole of this code for reference sake, and you get to do it inside of your main application. So they also have for Python, and it's also there for Go, but what we practically need is for Java. And so you just copy the whole of this. Finally, you want to generate your private key. So I'll generate key, and this key I'll open it. Oops, not here. I'll click on it again, and I want to open inside of my download directory, and I want to rename it to Spring Firebase key.json. I think this name is okay. Then I'll copy it, and back to IntelliJ. I'll switch over to my main branch at first before I paste it there. Switch to main, checkout. I want to do a merge with my start branch, so I'm going to say git merge start. It's not merger, but merge, and allow unrelated histories. So with this, I've successfully merged my main branch with my start branch. Okay, and now I think I'll take a look at my pom.xml file inside of my main branch to ensure that the necessary dependencies are still intact. Okay, my classes should be accurate. So we have my controller now, we have my DTO, the entity as well as the service. And finally, we want to paste our service account file. So we'll paste it directly on the project directory. Okay, so I'll just right click on it and then I'll paste. So that should be okay. So this is the content, it's a JSON file, and this is the content, the type, which is service account, the project ID, which is Spring Firebase, and a pretty much a string C492B. Then we have the private key ID, the private key itself, the client email, the client ID, as well as the authentication URL. So all of this is what we use to create our Firebase options element, or our Firebase options bean. So that is it. And the next thing for us now to do is to create that Firebase options. So right now, for us to get started with integrating Firebase and creating a bean, we need to include the Firebase admin dependency to our pom.xml file. So in order for us to get that dependency, we'll move over to the Marvin repository, and all you just practically have to do is search for the Firebase admin dependency. So this is the dependency. So I'll copy the whole of this dependency and Control C, and I'll move over to my application, and inside my pom.xml file, I'm going to paste that dependency underneath any other one of the dependency. Then I don't think I need this comment, so I just take it out, and then I'll resolve my Maven project. So while it's resolving, I want to create a config class where we'll define the Firebase app bean. So right here at my topmost package, I'm going to do an auth insert, and as you all know it, the process I take in creating my application, I'm going to place this particular config class inside of a new package I'll call config. So I'll go ahead and say config, and then the name of the class is the Firebase config. So at first we annotate with at configuration, so this should be at configuration, and I'm good to go. And finally, to create our bean, I'm going to use the add bean. Then this particular bean is a type of Firebase app, so this should be public base app. Then I'll say initialize Firebase. I have to import that class, and then we provide the content of our function or method. So in order for us to create this bean, we need to make use of our JSON file, which is pretty much the key. Okay, so it needs details from this particular JSON file to create our Firebase config class or our Firebase config bean. So we need to get the path. So at first I'll be saying string path service account path is equal to system dot get property. We want to get the directory, that is the current directory of our project. So we are going to use user.dro, and then we want to concatenate this particular path with the name of our service account file, which is the spring firebase key.json. So I'm going to say spring firebase key.json, and with that we are good to go. So one thing is that we have to create a stream from this particular file. Okay, we need to create a stream from the file, and in order for us to do just that, this is what we have to do. We have to say Firebase, not Firebase, but file input stream, and I'll say service account stream is equal to new file input stream, and then we'll pass our service account string as the parameter. So I think this throws an exception, so I'll add that to our method signature, and we still have a warning said it is used without a try with resources. Well, I think I'm good to go by just including file not found exception to the method signature. Our next one now is to initialize our Firebase options. So I'll make use of the Firebase options, oops, not app, but options instance. I'll say options is equal to Firebase options.builder build. Now in between the builder.build, we have to provide the necessary configuration that is required for us to successfully build these options and return the app. Okay, at first we want to set the credentials. So the content of our Spring Firebase-key.json is practically the credentials that we need. You see the auth URL, the token URL, the auth provider, as well as the client. So these details are pretty much the credentials that is needed. So we'll move back to our config and we set the credential. We say .set credentials, and the credentials will be Google credentials. So this should be Google credentials.fromStream, which is the stream we already defined, which is our service account stream. And finally, we want to set our storage bucket, and then we'll pass in the string, which happens to be the name of our storage bucket. So to get the name of our storage bucket, let me take a look at our Firebase key JSON, and we don't have the name of our storage bucket. So we'll move back to Firebase again during the initialization part. So we have our storage, and this is the name of our storage bucket. So I'll just, oops, I'm trying to copy the whole of this. Okay, let me see. So oops, let me see if I can just copy it and paste it somewhere. Okay, oops, I couldn't paste it as string. So back to this one, what we need is c492b.appspot.com, and this first part from here to here is the id. So what we just have to do is concatenate.appspot.com, or we just simply add the string. So back to our application, we move over to our we are still in our service key or our service account file. So we'll copy the whole of this, Ctrl C, and back to our Firebase app config, we paste it here, and in addition to that, we add .appspot.com. I think that is it. Okay, that should be what that is what I should have done. Pardon me. So I think we are good to go. So now finally, it says it throws an IO exception, so I'm also going to add that to method signature, so it overrides the other file not found exception, and then I'll just delete that import statement. And finally, we want to return options.initialize, oops, not options but FirebaseApp.initialize app, then we'll pass in our options object. So that brings us to the end of the configuration part of our Firebase instance. So now we've defined our configuration class, and we've also created our bean of Firebase app. Now what we need now is to start uploading our images to the storage bucket we have in Firebase. But then we haven't yet implemented the logic. So in order for us to implement the logic, we have to create a Firebase service class. And we already have a service package. So I'll create that Firebase service class inside of this package. So that should be an auth insert, a Java class, and then it should be Firebase service. Okay, now before we start with the implementation of the upload logic, let me show you the content of my student entity. So I think I have a feed by the name image URL. Okay. Oops, I failed to define that feed. So I'll just go ahead right now, and you should have a type of string. So that should be private string image URL. And one more thing I'll also have to do is to ensure that my application or properties file does not update, but it should change from updates to create drops. So you should as well do the same thing on your own part. Okay, so change to create drops so that it drops the other database you already have, and then create a new database. Now back to my student DTO class. I have a multi-part file as feed, and if I'm to show you my template, which happens to be the index template, during the filling of the form, I'm binding that multi-part file to the feed that I have in my student DTO. So let me just bring them close a bit. So I don't know where I have that particular class, but let's see. Let me see if I can. Let me move this one. So it's just wasting my time. So just to be clear, I'm passing my student DTO, a new instance of student DTO, to my index.html page, and I'm binding the multi-part file feed to my student DTO multi-part feature or multi-part feed. Okay, so that is just it. So this file part of my form has been bind to the multi-part file feed of my student DTO. So you get to understand. So that is just it. And finally, we can implement our upload method. So what our upload method simply returns is void. So we'll go ahead and say public void, and I'll just simply call it upload. Then we are going to pass in our multi-part file, and I'll say image file. Then I'll pass in the string, which should be the name of the image or the name of the file. So I'll say image name, and finally we can start the implementation. So we want to get hold of our file input stream. So that should be input stream is equal to image file dot get input stream. I have to import, and it throws an error, so I'll have to add that to our method signature, and we're good to go. And now I want to get hold of our storage bucket. So remember that we have already defined our config class, so we can make use of any parameter or logic that is associated with our Firebase instance. So this should be bucket is equal to storage client dot get instance dot bucket, and I'll have to import my bucket from this package. So that should be an auth enter, and finally I want to do bucket dot create, and we'll pass in the name of our image. I will say image name, followed by our stream, which should be our input stream, and then we can go ahead and specify the content type that we are saving. So this should be image slash an asterisk in case we are saving JPG, JPEG, PNG, and so on and so forth. And finally, we are good to go. So this is basically the simple function that will help us upload our file to our storage bucket. But in order for this class to be a service class, we need to annotate with at either component or at service. So since we have it inside of the service package, I would go with at component. Sorry, I said at component, I will go with at service. Pardon me, happens sometimes. So that is pretty much it. Now what we've done now is just to upload the image to the storage bucket, but we haven't really implemented the logic that gets the URL of that particular image. But before we implement the logic, let us try and save a new user or a new student to our application, the database, and see how the upload function works. Now in order for this upload function to work, we move back to our student service class and we want to inject an instance of the Firebase service that we just created. So we create a private final feed for it. We create Firebase service, and it should be Firebase service as well. And right here, instead of our save method, class, instead of our save student function, not save method class, but save student function, pardon me, we are going to get the email of our user at first, or our student at first. So that should be string email is equal to dto.get email, and we want to change the value of email to email dot replace. So anywhere there's a dot, we want to replace with an underscore. Okay, and finally we want to pass now Firebase service dot upload, and we'll pass now name of the file, which should be email, followed by dto dot get multipath file. And then we also have to include the throw exception to method signature. Firebase service, I think we have that function, public upload. Okay, the multipath file comes before our email, so I'll have to copy and paste it right after our multipath file in the space to make things easily readable. Now I'll have to include the throw exception to the method signature, and I think the issue has been resolved. Let me see. So right here in save student, I'll also have to include it in my controller class. So that's just basically it. Now I'll run the application and I'll be saving a new student to the database, passing old credentials or old properties, not credentials but old properties. So our application has started, and thankfully we didn't get any exception that was thrown, so everything have been implemented properly. So the next thing for us to do now is move over to our localhost endpoint. So right here inside of student profile, I'm going to go back to the home page, and then I just have to reload. So this time around, I pretty much don't have any student or any user saved in the database, so I just create a new user again. So I'll make use of the previous details, Anthony, and I'll say Michael. The middle name is optional, so I can leave that, and we have anthony@gmail.com. Then finally, I want to write about the student and then the speech. So I think I'll open this one. Okay, copy the whole of this text, Control C, and back here I'll simply paste it, and I'll do away with all this extra space. Okay, and to the next one, I'll just paste same thing, something similar. So it doesn't really matter if I change it or not, just for demonstration purpose. So back here, I'll copy the whole of this again as well. Control C, and then I'll paste it here. Now the contact info, I'll leave it like this, and finally I'll choose an age of 25. Then we choose a file to upload. So I think I have an image of mine here in my camera rolls. I'm going to make use of this particular image, and I'm going to open. I'm going to send. Okay, and here we have it. Meet the student Anthony, about me. I create whatever, and these are the details of what has been encoded. So for instance, my favorite is something I encoded. When you go through the the project, that's the source code, you are going to see where I have coded this. So playing football, reading stories, traveling, and cooking are feats that are the same for all students across board. So I just did a dummy data right there. So you see it inside of my service class. That's the student service class. Now we don't yet have the image because we have not started. We haven't gotten the URL of this particular student from the database. We haven't really gotten it. So this is still Anthony, but I will go back to create a new student with a different name. So I'll make use of Jerry, and this should be jerry@gmail.com, and then everything else should pretty much be the same. And I'll just I'll change the photo of Jerry. Okay, so this last photo I have here, and I'll open, and then I'll send. So you don't have to see Anthony twice because I've used Anthony as an example in the other time. So that was during the beginning phase of the project where I just practically explained to you. So I made use of Anthony. Now we have Jerry, and we also have the same photo, but these persons have different photos. Now to clarify that our Firebase storage bucket is working as expected, we move back to this tab where we have our storage, and what I have to do now is just reload the page. Okay, and now you see that we now have the image that has been saved. We have for Anthony, and we also have for Jerry, and instead of a dot here we have an underscore com, because I don't pretty much want to also have dots right here. So we have an underscore com. So when I open it right now, we see the image that has been stored for Anthony. Oops. Okay, Okay, I think there is an error because I'm making use of an asterisk. So I'll make the correction and change from asterisk to JPG or JPE. So it should specify the type properly. So I was thinking maybe it's going to just indicate that we can save a PNG or any other image file. So back to my service class, which is my Firebase service. I'll change from asterisk to JPEG and I'll be good to go. So we've pretty much seen that our file has been uploaded. So the next thing for us to do now is to create logic that is going to get the URL of the saved image, and then we take that URL and store it inside of our database. So right now that we've successfully changed the content type, before we implement the logic that returns the URL or that retrieves the URL, we want to at first save a new student to our database and see how the image is being stored. Okay, so we want to first of all see the image representation or see the image that we send alongside this form. So I'll start the application, and while it's starting off, I want to move to Firebase and I'll reload at first to ensure that it's still proper. That is, for now there is no image inside of our bucket because I previously deleted the other two files that we saved before because we failed to make use of the correct type. So right now back to IntelliJ, let me see. Okay, it's coming up again. After it has successfully started, we're going to send in the request again to the server. Okay, right now back to my browser. I'll move over to the student profile. I think I have to, and I'll go back and let us take a look at the form again. So we have isaiah@gmail.com this time around, and I'm going to change the file to a new one. Let me pretty much use something else. So I'll move over to pictures and to my screenshots. Let me use a thumbnail I previously used for one of my video, and then I'll send this request. Now you see it's taking quite a couple of seconds for this request to be successful because of the logic it performs. It has first send the image to our Firebase bucket and then continue with storing of the other details of this particular student inside of the database. So if I'm to move back to my Firebase storage instance, then I reload the page again. You'll see that we now have the single file, which is the image of this particular student we just saved inside of the database, and the image that was stored inside of the bucket. So I'll click on this image name and we have a preview of what we've just passed in as the image. Then to open up this image in a new tab, I click on this link icon and we have it right here. Okay, so this is basically how we store inside of how we store our image inside of the Firebase bucket. So right now we'll take a look at the URL that opens this page for us. So this is the URL we want to take a close look at. So we have, after this particular file part, after the firebase.google APIs, all the way down to the name of the file, there's something attached to it. Now we have this query parameters at first. We have the auth parameter, and the value of this auth parameter is media, and then we also have the token. Now if these two parameters are not present, that is, I take these two parameters out, then I send this request, what we have now is a JSON file. Okay, and this JSON file contains a couple of map and key value pairs. So the name of the file, the bucket the file was being saved, and we also have the download tokens of the file. And these download tokens is the tokens that primarily was present here before I deleted the part. So you see that we have F9, 2D, FF3B, and that is exactly what we have here. So we need this token in order for us to access the image inside of our storage bucket. So for us to access the image from our application, we need the token, and we also need to specify the value of our auth as media. Okay, so we'll be configuring our application, providing the logic to ensure that we get these parameters. So at first, to make things a little bit simpler, I'm going to take this whole part before the name or before the email of the student. So we need this part as a base URL for us to get our user or our student email. So I'll just Ctrl C to copy it, and I'll stop the application and move to my application.properties file. I want to see image.base.url is equal to the old text I just copied. Okay, so this is it. Now we'll move back to our student service class, and inside of this student service class I want to inject that particular string. Okay, that is the base URL part that I just copied, and to do that we create a new field that's called private string base URL, or image base URL to be precise, and I'll annotate with that value, the $sign, then we'll say image.base.url, and I'll semicolon to end the variable definition. So that is basically it. So now we have to create our method that is going to retrieve it for us. So we are going to be sending a request that returns that JSON file as response, and then we are going to paste that response and get the download tokens, and then we set it as the value of the token and properly store the URL that we can use to access that image inside of the database as the image URL. So just take a close look at everything I'll be doing. Now if there's any step along the way that you didn't get properly or you didn't get correctly, please do draw it to my attention in the comment section below, and I'll be very happy to give you a proper feedback on it. Okay, so right now I'm going to define this method, and this method is going to return a string object. So it should be public string, then we're going to say get image URL. Okay, and this image URL is going to take in a base image, so sorry, a base URL. So this should be string base URL. Practically we just have to return an empty string at first, but we'll be returning the base URL later after the implementation logic. So if you recall, if I'm to go back to my browser, you'll discover that immediately after this first part, this first base URL, we have the name or the email of the student that is being saved in the application. Okay, so we have the name of the file okay, just take note of that. This is the name of the file. So immediately after this base part follows the name of the file, and this name was what we generated inside of our code because I changed .com to an underscore. So we now have Isaiah. This is just a symbol of at gmail.com as the name of the file. So we'll move back to my code editor, and right here where we are saving the student, this particular save student method, we are going to add an additional logic that should be string image URL is equal to get image URL. Okay, and we are going to pass in, Okay, let me see. Okay, we are going to pass in our image base URL. Now before we pass in our image base URL, we want to change the value of this image base URL. So I'll practically not change the value, but there's something I'll do about it. So I'm going to create a new variable. I'll call string URL is equal to image base URL plus our email. Okay, so this is where we are changing the value, or we are replacing all period in the email to an underscore. So we want to concatenate this image based URL that we define inside of our application properties file with this particular email. Okay, and now we are going to pass in just the URL. That is it. Or you can as well do something. You can just copy the whole of this as it is and paste it inside of the inside as a parameter to get image URL. So we are getting this URL back, and then we are going to be setting it by saying DTO, okay, dot image set. Okay, I don't really have that feed now, so I'll just leave it for now. We are going to implement it later. Now back to our get image URL function. We want to make use of the HTTP client instance to send a request to this particular base URL endpoint, getting the JSON file, and from the JSON file we are going to get our download tokens so that we'll be able to access every image URL that is being stored in the bucket. So now we are going to say HTTP client is equal to new HTTP client again dot new HTTP client, and HTTP request is equal to HTTP request dot new builder dot build. Now in between the new builder dot build, we set in a couple of parameters, or we pass in a couple of parameters, and one of the parameters we'll be passing is the URI. So this should be dot URI. Then we're going to say URI dot create. Then we'll pass in our base URL, and I'll have to import this class. Alt enter, and that is it. So we are good to go. So now we are going to create an HTTP response. Response should be equals to client dot send, pass now request followed by an HTTP response dot body handler dot of string. So this basically just returns the content as a string, and this throws an exception, so we are going to add it as the method signature. We're going to add it to the method signature. So and finally, let us take a look at our response. Okay, we have to change to type of HTTP response parameterized type of string. Okay, that is just it. So with this, the error is gone. So we have a response as string. Now what we want to return now is the response. Okay, no, not the response, but we have to paste through the response before we return the final URL value. So record that the response is coming in the form of a JSON file. So we are going to get the response body. So we are going to say string JSON response is equal to response dot body. Okay, and finally we want to make use of JSON node new object mapper to map through all the nodes. We want to read the tree, not new object nodes, new object mapper dot read tree. Then we have the JSON response. Finally, to get our image token, I'm going to say image token is equal to node dot get. Then we'll pass in the string of the variable, which is download tokens. We are going to pass it inside of that particular function call. So Ctrl C, and back to my code editor, I'll just practically paste it here. So it takes in the node of, that is the value of the download tokens from the response that will be generated from the JSON node. Okay, so we have to get it as test, and that's basically it. So we now have the image token. Okay, now it's one thing we have to take into consideration. Now if we move back and I decide to go back, we see that we have auth equals to media and token. So we need to include this part as well to our base URL. Okay, so basically this part is the one we are using to send this request now, because I concatenated the email with this other part from the code. Now we also need to include this other part before we add the token. Okay, before we add the token, so we are going to copy this one as well, and back to IntelliJ, I'm going to say string URL is equal to our base URL plus the string we just copied plus our image token. So that is it. And now we pretty much just have to take this return statement from this part and just place it here. So this is basically what we want to return. So a quick overview of this particular function definition. So we have a new client. So we are creating an instance of a client. You know what a client is, such as our browser, can be a mobile application. So we are creating a new instance of it. We want to send a request. So we have to also create a new request of type HTTP. Okay, HTTP request. And to create this request, we make use of the builder pattern. And HTTP request.new builder. Then we set the URL by using the URL.create function and passing in our base URL. So our base URL is the URL that was passed in when calling this particular function. Okay, get image URL, then we pass in the URL, which is the base URL initially plus the email. Okay, so you take note of that, because the email is the name of the file. Then we build the request. Now to send the request, we need to make use of the client. So that's why we have the client.send. Then we pass in the request as one of the parameters, followed by the HTTP response.body handlers of string. Okay, so it returns a type of string and store inside of our HTTP response. Now to paste through the body of this string or of this returned response, we make use of the JSON response, or the JSON response, which is an instance of string, to get the body. So it presents it as a string Okay, the response.body will not be sent as string, and this JSON response is now equal to it. So the JSON node passes through this particular string using the object mapper to read the tree. So that's just basically, just take a look at it and try to understand what has been implemented here. Okay, and now that we have the URL method defined, we move back to our save student method, and I'll go back to our DTO, and this time around I'm going to define one function, which is the private string image URL. Okay, and back to my student service, I'll basically just take this whole part from it, and I'll say DTO dot set then image URL, then I'll pass the whole of this as parameter to the function. Now, since this also throws an exception, we also have to include that to our method signature in the save student. So interrupted exception. Let me take a look at what we have now. So we also have to practically include it here. Okay, so that is it. Back to my service class. The issue is gone, and I think we are good to go because we've set our image URL. Now, to be very sure that the image URL is proper, I want to print it out. So this should be SOUT image URL plus DTO dot get image URL. So before anything, I just want to print it out first to be very sure. Okay, and finally, this has to be before the Firebase service.upload. So Control C, and I'll move it to the top. Okay, so that is it. We are good to go now. And one more thing is to go to my function that maps this DTO to my student. I want to set the image URL of my student. So this should be image URL dot image URL. Then we pass now DTO dot get image URL, and shift tab to push it back a bit. So this, I think we are good to go, and yeah, I'll just run the application and hopefully there won't be any error or an exception, but it works perfectly fine. And then back to my Firebase storage instance, I'll close that tab, and I want to delete the initial image we have. Delete. I'll move back to IntelliJ now. So once again, I'm going to send this request again, but this time I'm going to be using the details of Anthony, and then I'll just send in the request to the server. And then while it's sending, I want to take a look at what we have printed in our console as the image URL. Okay, so this is what we have now. So we now have the auth equals media and the token has been generated, and hopefully when I click on this, it should take me to the page. Okay, so that is practically what we want. So we now have the URL and we've generated it, and we are storing it inside of our database. So if I'm to open up on git bash, I click on select from student. Oops, don't have that, so I'll do it again. Okay, so now we now have the image URL. So this is the image URL, and it has been stored successfully. And previously, before I added this fit to this particular student class, we didn't have that image URL in the other query of the student table. So just so you know, we now have this URL stored. So we move back to our template, which is our profile template.html, so to make the proper corrections. So right here we have the value as an hard-coded link. Okay, what we basically want is to get the student.url, just like we have a lot of them here. So we have just we have student as the field, as the object that is mapped to this particular section, and here we have student.firstname and it returns the first name. We have student.about and it returns the about that has been passed. We also have student.email and student.contact. So we have my email here and we have my tail, but immediately thymeleaf is being is templating the file or the model. It's changed this my email to the dynamic variable that is being passed. So okay, when we take a look at our final file, I'll open this one. Okay, we get to see that we have isaiah@gmail.com and the number in place of my email and my tail. So that's just basically it. And finally, we take a look at the list of hobbies. Okay, so we didn't define any hobby, but immediately the application runs and it discovered that this particular student have hobbies that has been defined. It's automatically going to loop through each of them using the each attribute and set the value of the test inside of the list elements. So that is it for thymeleaf. Like I stated, if you want a full video tutorial on thymeleaf, please do let me know in the comment section and I will be doing a video on that in the future. So we are practically almost done. So back to our image URL, I'll simply just highlight the whole of this. Okay, let me just take it to this other part. And what we want to pass now is the student dot image URL. Okay, and we have to include our closing string. So that is it, and we are good to go. So I'll run the application this time around, and let me change the value to update in case it works as expected. So back to my application or properties file. I'm going to change this one now from create job to update, and then I'll run the application. Okay, let's see if we still have the single student inside of the database. Okay, we don't have any rows for now. And back to my browser, I'll just move back and I'll send again. Okay, it's taking quite some time. Okay, now we have the image. Okay, so instead of the previously high code image that we now have a new image, which is the image that was saved alongside with the details of this particular student. Okay, now back to Anthony. I'm going to move back, and then since we don't have Anthony in our database again, so if I'm to select, we just have a single user. So I'll send Anthony's request again to create Anthony and store inside of the database, and you see that we now have a new photo. So it's not dynamically changing because we now have the URL of each student defined and stored inside of the Firebase storage bucket. So that's practically brings us to the end of this video. So you take a close look that we've successfully integrated Spring with Firebase. Okay, we're making use of the storage feature of Firebase. Now that is not the only service that Firebase has to offer. The only thing that I discovered so far is that as we send requests over time, it becomes a little bit slower. But there are other logic that you implement to ensure that the throughput or the network latency is not that large, the bandwidth, to ensure that the request you send goes fast and sends back the response that you require. Okay, so that is it. Now please, if you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so. Give this video a thumbs up and as well ping that bell icon so that whenever the next video comes live, you get notified. So with all of those stated, peace out, and until the next one, keep being your best self. Catch you.